Stay informed, stay ahead. Subscribe now to USA Fresh News.
Today in USA Fresh News, Good Morning America. A shocking assassination dominates today's headlines. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot and killed during a Utah campus event, an attack officials say is under active investigation and that leaders across the spectrum have condemned. Markets weigh softer data and the path of Fed policy, while Washington's fights over immigration and governance intensify. Abroad, flashpoints and climate extremes keep pressuring supply chains and daily life. We'll connect what matters, from security and trust to money and weather, clear, fast, and grounded.
So let's see or listen. America begins the day under the shadow of a tragedy that has shaken the political world and reverberated far beyond partisan lines. Charlie Kirk, the conservative commentator and founder of Turning Point USA, was shot and killed during a campus event in Utah. Authorities quickly confirmed his death and opened an investigation, but as of now, many details, including the motive, whether the attack was politically driven, and how the gunman gained access, remain unclear. What is certain is that the shockwaves are spreading across the country. Kirk, only in his early 30s, had built a high-profile career as a speaker, activist, and influential figure among conservative youth. His organization, Turning Point USA, had become a staple on college campuses, promoting right-of-center ideas and often drawing protests from student groups opposed to his politics. That backdrop makes the setting of his assassination especially jarring. A campus auditorium where debate, not violence, was supposed to prevail. Students who attended the event described the moment as surreal, a sudden eruption of chaos that shattered what should have been a routine lecture. Political leaders across the spectrum have condemned the attack. Republican lawmakers have described it as an assault not only on Kirk, but on free speech and the right of Americans to express political views without fear. Prominent Democrats have likewise expressed outrage and sorrow, stressing that violence has no place in political life, even amid deep divisions. That bipartisan chorus of condemnation underscores a rare moment of unity in an otherwise fractured climate. Yet it also highlights the fragility of American democracy when words turn to weapons. The killing has immediately reignited debates about security for public figures. Kirk, though not an elected official, was a nationally recognized activist with a loyal following and equally vocal critics. His events were often met with protests, but security had typically been present to manage tensions. Now, questions are being asked about whether enough precautions were taken and whether rising political polarization in the U.S. is creating an environment where high-profile activists are increasingly at risk. The echoes of past political assassinations, from Robert F. Kennedy to Martin Luther King Jr., are hard to ignore. Beyond the immediate tragedy, the attack is forcing reflection on the state of discourse in America. For years, heated rhetoric on social media, in partisan media outlets, and in campaign rallies has escalated. Critics argue that this constant drumbeat of anger dehumanizes political opponents, making violence more likely. Supporters of free speech counter that robust, even harsh debate is the bedrock of democracy and cannot be blamed for the actions of individuals bent on destruction. In the wake of Kirk's death, the country is once again confronted with the question, where is the line between expression and incitement, and how does a democracy safeguard one without threatening the other? For Kirk's supporters, the assassination is personal. He was a mentor to many young conservatives, a figure who encouraged them to engage with politics and push for change. For his critics, while disagreements with his ideas were sharp, the use of violence is universally acknowledged as abhorrent and destructive. Universities, too, are grappling with the implications. Higher education has long been a forum for debate, but when violence erupts in those spaces, it threatens the very mission of campuses as places of dialogue and learning. The investigation will likely dominate headlines in the coming days. Authorities are expected to release more information about the suspect, including background, possible affiliations, and motives. Already, law enforcement officials are urging the public not to jump to conclusions, aware of how quickly misinformation can spread in the aftermath of such events. But the speculation is already running rampant online, with partisan groups on both sides framing the attack in ways that reinforce their existing narratives. This, too, is part of the story. In an age of instant communication, tragedies become battlegrounds for interpretation as quickly as they become moments for mourning. At a practical level, the assassination is likely to spark renewed debates over gun policy, security at political events, and even the tone of political discourse itself. Past episodes of political violence have often triggered calls for legislation, sometimes focused on firearms, sometimes on social media regulation, sometimes on policing extremist groups. Whether this moment will lead to new policy or simply intensify the existing gridlock is an open question. This single event sits alongside other pressing headlines that reflect the broader climate of uncertainty. Markets remain buoyant, with Wall Street cheering the prospect of a Federal Reserve rate cut. All three major indexes closed at record highs, driven by investor bets that easier credit is on the horizon. Yet beneath that optimism lies fragility. Upcoming revisions to payroll data could show that the labor market is weaker than it appeared, possibly overstated by nearly 1 million jobs. If that proves true, the market's celebration could turn quickly into anxiety as investors recalibrate their expectations. For everyday Americans, these numbers are not abstract. They determine mortgage rates, car loan approvals, and the viability of small business expansion. Meanwhile, immigration once again thrusts itself into the national spotlight. Operation Midway Blitz, conducted by ICE in Chicago, led to dozens of arrests and reignited a fierce debate about how America handles its borders and communities. Supporters say such operations deter organized crime and uphold the rule of law, while opponents argue that raids fracture neighborhoods, foster fear, and make cooperation with law enforcement less likely. The economic dimension is clear. Sectors like agriculture and hospitality, already battling labor shortages, face even greater challenges when immigration policy is unpredictable and enforcement actions intensify. In Washington, scandal and governance battles continue. The resurfacing of a handwritten note allegedly signed by former President Donald Trump in Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book once again drew attention, reigniting both accusations and defenses. Some frame it as part of a larger pattern of elite impunity, while others dismiss it as a politically motivated distraction. Regardless of interpretation, the story adds to the climate of mistrust in institutions, already eroded by years of polarization and scandal fatigue. Overlaying all of this are climate extremes that serve as a constant reminder of long-term risks. California's marine heat wave is destabilizing fisheries, threatening coastal ecosystems, and fueling harmful algal blooms. Globally, northern China's longest rainy season since 1961 and its hottest summer on record underscore how climate disruptions abroad can ripple into American supply chains, raising food prices and reshaping trade. Taken together, the headlines present a portrait of a nation under stress. A shocking act of violence shakes the political sphere. Markets teeter between optimism and fragility. Immigration enforcement sparks controversy, scandals feed cynicism, and climate extremes impose new costs. For Americans, these stories converge not in abstract debates but in daily life. Mortgage decisions, family safety, job security, and the price of groceries. The question that hovers over all of them is whether America's resilience will prove sufficient to absorb the shocks and adapt before crises multiply. Beyond the immediate headlines of tragedy, markets, and enforcement, a second layer of stories is quietly shaping America's future. These narratives do not always command front-page attention, but they set the conditions under which major events unfold. They are the structural shifts, economic, diplomatic, technological, and cultural, that will define the nation's trajectory in the months ahead. Energy demand continues to rise at a pace that surprises even seasoned experts. Across the country, utilities are reporting record levels of consumption, driven by the combined forces of expanding artificial intelligence data centers and increasingly hot summers. A single AI server rack can consume as much electricity as several hundred homes, and companies are building vast facilities filled with them. In Virginia's Data Center Alley, in Texas, and across the Midwest, local grids are being pushed to their limits. At the same time, households are cranking up air conditioning to cope with longer, hotter summers, a pattern tied closely to climate change. Together, these forces are exposing just how fragile America's energy infrastructure has become. Brownouts and price spikes are not just technical glitches. They ripple into business operations, consumer bills, and political debates over modernization. Historically, energy stress has triggered bold policy responses, from the electrification drives of the 1930s to the nuclear programs of the 1970s. Today's debate centers on renewables, storage, and grid intelligence. The question is whether the political will exists to deliver upgrades on a timeline that prevents breakdowns. Trade is another domain where hidden shifts are unfolding. The Supreme Court is preparing to rule on whether the Trump administration exceeded its authority in imposing certain tariffs under reciprocal justifications. If the court rules against those measures, the federal government could be forced to refund billions of dollars in collected duties. That would be a seismic outcome, not only for the companies that paid the tariffs, but for the balance of power between the legislative and executive branches. For decades, presidents have enjoyed broad discretion in shaping trade policy, often invoking national security. A judicial reversal would curtail that power, reasserting Congress's role and potentially reshaping the way America interacts with its trading partners. For industries ranging from steel to agriculture to electronics, the stakes are enormous. For households, the link may be less obvious but equally real. Tariffs affect the prices of cars, appliances, and everyday goods. A ruling in Washington courtrooms could change receipts at the checkout line across the nation. Corporate America adds its own layer of uncertainty. Intel, once the flagship of American semiconductor dominance, is struggling to regain its footing. The sudden resignation of its products chief highlighted a company already battling to keep pace with rivals like NVIDIA and Taiwan's TSMC. This is more than a corporate drama. It is a national security concern. Semiconductors now sit at the heart of everything from smartphones to weapons systems, making chip supply chains as strategic as oil reserves once were. Washington has invested billions through the CHIPS Act to strengthen domestic capacity, but capital alone cannot substitute for leadership and execution. If Intel falters, America's dream of technological independence may falter too, leaving the country reliant on fragile overseas supply chains in geopolitically tense regions. For workers in California and investors on Wall Street, the stakes are personal. For policymakers in Washington, they are existential. Diplomacy abroad continues to test American endurance. In Europe, allies are working to close loopholes in sanctions against Russia, aiming to sustain pressure as the war in Ukraine drags on. Sanctions are often wars of patience. They rarely force immediate change, but can sap an adversary's resources over time. The challenge lies in consistency. Each lapse in enforcement provides Russia with an escape valve, whether through Asian or Middle Eastern partners. For Americans, the effects of sanctions are visible at gas stations and grocery stores. Energy prices and shipping costs fluctuate in part because of how tightly sanctions are applied. Transatlantic unity, once assumed, is constantly tested as domestic pressures within European states make coordination harder. Closer to home, the U.S. Military's presence in the Caribbean has become a more visible feature of American policy. The interception and destruction of a vessel linked to Venezuela's Tren de Aragua cartel is part of a broader campaign to prevent transnational crime from reaching U.S. shores. Defense officials have emphasized that these operations are not exercises but real missions with real stakes. For Venezuela, the actions are violations of sovereignty. For Washington, they are essential to safeguard maritime routes and blunt criminal networks that fuel drug trafficking and human exploitation. The tension illustrates the blurred line between law enforcement and international power projection. For American communities grappling with opioid addiction or human trafficking, the link between distant naval operations and local struggles is less abstract than it seems. Culture, too, is reshaping policy debates. Energy use, once the domain of regulators and engineers, is increasingly a public conversation. Media outlets, podcasts, and influencers are framing consumption as a moral question. Is streaming endless content, running AI models, or attending energy-intensive events socially responsible? This mirrors past cultural shifts, from the rise of recycling in the 1990s to the adoption of hybrid cars in the 2000s. When behavior becomes a cultural expectation, companies often adapt faster than governments legislate. If energy consumption becomes a symbol of responsibility, corporate practices may change in ways that alter demand patterns long before new laws are passed. Taken together, these stories depict a nation grappling with strains that are less visible than headlines about assassinations or market surges, but no less consequential. Energy systems are bending under demand. Trade law is facing a constitutional reckoning. Corporate giants are stumbling at moments of strategic importance. Sanctions require long-term unity to bite. Military operations close to home blur the line between defense and diplomacy. Cultural shifts are reframing technical issues as moral imperatives. For everyday Americans, the connections are tangible. A higher electric bill may reflect server farms hundreds of miles away. A higher price tag on a car or appliance may reflect courtroom debates in Washington. Job stability in the Midwest may depend on corporate leadership in Silicon Valley. The cost of heating oil in the Northeast may reflect sanction enforcement in Europe. The safety of a neighborhood may tie back to patrols thousands of miles away in the Caribbean. The larger lesson is that today's secondary stories are often tomorrow's breaking news. Energy strain can spark blackouts. Tariff disputes can reshape trade alliances. Corporate missteps can weaken national competitiveness. Sanctions can redraw alliances. Cultural conversations can evolve into laws. America's history shows resilience, but resilience depends on foresight, coordination, and the ability to act before cracks widen. These quieter narratives deserve attention because they reveal how the foundation of national strength is being tested and reshaped every day.
Sports. This week in American sports has been defined by surprise upsets, playoff pushes, and bold coaching decisions, reminders that the drama of competition often mirrors the unpredictability of national life. Football, baseball, and college athletics have all delivered moments that captured attention well beyond their fan bases. The NFL opened its international calendar in São Paulo with a shocker. The Los Angeles Chargers stunned the defending Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, in a 27-21 victory that reverberated across the league. Quarterback Justin Herbert showcased poise and precision, throwing for more than 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, outdueling Patrick Mahomes, who struggled to find rhythm despite a late rally. The game was more than an upset, was a statement that the Chargers, often dismissed as talented but inconsistent, could compete with the league's elite. For the Chiefs, the loss was a reminder that dynasties can falter when timing slips and defenses adjust. Economically, the match marked a milestone for the NFL's expansion strategy, with fans in Brazil filling the stadium and proving the sport's growing global reach. Back in the United States, the Pittsburgh Steelers staged a thrilling 34-32 win over the New York Jets, but the aftermath brought both challenges and swift responses. Safety Deshaun Elliott suffered an MCL sprain during the game, leaving a hole in the secondary. Within hours, the Steelers signed veteran Jabril Peppers, a versatile defender with a reputation for toughness. For fans, the move symbolized resilience. Pittsburgh's front office was determined to maintain momentum despite setbacks. Such rapid roster adjustments underscore the NFL's constant chess match, where management decisions off the field can be as decisive as plays on it. Other franchises faced turning points of their own. The Green Bay Packers added running back Pierre Strong Jr. to their practice squad, seeking depth in a backfield plagued by injuries. Meanwhile, the New York Giants absorbed a blow when linebacker Micah McFadden was sidelined with a foot injury. His absence threatens to weaken a defense already under pressure in the competitive NFC East. These shifts highlight how fortunes in the NFL can pivot in a single week, sometimes in a single play. Major League Baseball has entered its most thrilling phase as September's playoff races tighten. The Texas Rangers, fighting to stay in contention for a wildcard spot, delivered a crucial 5-0 victory over the Milwaukee Brewers. Michael Hellman was the breakout star, hitting a grand slam and adding an RBI double, while pitcher Jacob Latz dominated with 6 shutout innings. The win kept Rangers fans in Arlington dreaming of an October run. Meanwhile, the Chicago Cubs improved their record to 81-63, strengthening postseason odds, while storied franchises like the Yankees and Red Sox remain in a fierce struggle for survival in the American League's crowded wildcard race. The intensity of September baseball extends beyond the majors. In AAA, the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders affiliate of the Yankees are closing in on their league's second-half title, a reminder of the importance of development pipelines. For big league contenders, depth often makes the difference in October, and the Rail Riders' surge is fueling optimism about the Yankees' future. College football added another twist to the week's narrative. Colorado head coach Deion Sanders made headlines by promoting third-string quarterback Ryan Staub to starter after his breakout performance in a 31-7 win over Delaware. Staub threw 2 touchdowns and displayed a calm command that impressed both teammates and fans. Sanders' decision to reward performance over reputation energized Colorado supporters, showing that even established programs can reinvent themselves in bold ways. Beyond wins and losses, the move highlighted how leadership and risk-taking can capture national attention in college sports. What ties all these stories together is the theme of resilience and surprise. Herbert's brilliance in Brazil, Hellman's heroics in Texas, Pepper's fresh start in Pittsburgh, and Staub's leap in Colorado all demonstrated how athletes and organizations adapt to adversity and seize opportunity. Economically, these games fuel massive revenues from television contracts and ticket sales to local bars and tourism. Culturally, they provide common ground in a divided time, sparking debates in living rooms, workplaces, and online forums alike. At their best, sports reflect the broader American story: unpredictability, resilience, and hope. Whether it is the Chargers toppling champions, the Rangers chasing October glory, or Colorado reinventing its future under Sanders, the week's competitions reminded the nation that drama on the field often carries lessons off it.
Weather across the United States this week is a study in contrasts, with regions experiencing vastly different conditions that nonetheless share a common theme. Climate extremes are increasingly shaping daily life, the economy, and long-term planning. From the parched landscapes of the West to storm-threatened coastlines in the Southeast, from crisp autumn mornings in the Midwest and Northeast to marine anomalies along the Pacific, the skies are telling a complex story. In the West, heat continues to dominate. California, Nevada, and Arizona are all recording temperatures well above seasonal averages. Soil moisture is at record lows, leaving landscapes brittle and heightening the risk of wildfires. Even though the region has not yet reached its peak fire season, officials warn that shifting winds could ignite dangerous flare-ups at any time. Communities are quietly updating evacuation plans, while residents are keeping emergency kits ready. The memory of past Septembers, when catastrophic blazes devastated neighborhoods, strained air quality, and displaced thousands, looms large. For farmers and agricultural workers, the risks are twofold. Not only do wildfires threaten crops and infrastructure, but extreme heat also increases health risks, lowering productivity and driving up costs. Families, meanwhile, face everyday decisions about whether to keep children indoors and how to prepare for days when smoke chokes the air. The Midwest and Northeast, by contrast, are easing into autumn. Cooler nights and crisp mornings are beginning to define the daily rhythm. Farmers welcome the conditions as ideal for harvesting corn and soybeans, with drier fields making machinery easier to operate. City residents are reveling in the break from summer's humidity, crowding parks and outdoor spaces. Yet even in this pleasant transition, challenges remain. Rapid shifts in temperature can aggravate respiratory conditions, prompting public health advisories. Energy companies face the annual balancing act of transitioning from high summer cooling demand to rising winter heating needs. This shift affects millions of households through fluctuating utility bills, a reminder that even mild weather transitions carry economic weight. In the Southeast, unsettled skies are the norm. Scattered thunderstorms fueled by lingering tropical moisture have dominated forecasts, While no major hurricanes are currently threatening U.S. shores, meteorologists emphasize that September is the historical peak of the Atlantic hurricane season. Coastal communities from Florida to the Carolinas remain vigilant, aware of how quickly a tropical depression can strengthen into a major storm. Even moderate flooding from heavy rains can disrupt local commerce, tourism, and infrastructure. For small businesses dependent on visitors, every weather forecast doubles as an economic outlook. Insurance companies are also on edge, knowing that even a near-miss storm can translate into billions in claims. The Pacific Coast is grappling with a different but equally troubling phenomenon: an ongoing marine heat wave. Sea surface temperatures are running as much as 7 degrees above average, triggering harmful algal blooms, altering fish migration patterns, and disrupting marine ecosystems. Coastal businesses and fisheries are feeling the strain, with some reporting reduced catches and rising costs. Scientists warn that the warming waters are not only ecological anomalies, but also drivers of unusual weather patterns, including muggy nights and erratic coastal winds. For communities that depend on fishing or tourism, the changes are more than an inconvenience. They are existential challenges. When taken together, these conditions reveal a deeper truth. Weather is not background noise, but a primary force shaping American life. Wildfire risk in the West, harvest conditions in the Midwest, storm threats in the Southeast, and warming seas in the Pacific all connect to health, safety, and economics. A family in Boston may see their energy bill climb as utilities adjust to new demand cycles. A vineyard in California may struggle with heat and fire risk. A fisherman in Oregon may lose income to algal blooms. A restaurant in Miami may close for days after floodwaters disrupt tourism. The larger pattern is clear. Climate extremes are no longer predictions for tomorrow. They are the reality of today. For policymakers, that means urgent choices about infrastructure, energy resilience, and disaster preparedness. For businesses, it means adjusting operations and hedging risks. For households, it means factoring weather into budgets, schedules, and even health plans. The skies this week tell a story of contrasts, but the common thread is pressure on ecosystems, on economies, and on people making everyday decisions. America's weather is not just shaping the week, it is shaping the future.